The brooding young man had overcome so much. Now, finally, he seemed to have reached his limit. He had endured the loss of his mother, his sister, and a first love. And now he had broken an engagement, his closest friend was moving away, and his political career was in shambles. The smothering darkness of depression engulfed him as friends removed nearby sharp objects, worried that he might end his life to escape the bleakness of his pain. As Abraham Lincoln clung to an ebbing glimmer of life's purpose, his friend Joshua Speed came to him with a last appeal. He pleaded with Lincoln that if he did not rally, he would die. Lincoln responded, "I would just as soon die right now, but I have not done anything to make any human being remember that I have lived." Lincoln eventually arose from his abyss and resumed life's journey, confronting countless obstacles and enduring many failures. Yet he learned much from each misstep, eventually defying expectations to reach the pinnacle of political leadership as president, one who led this nation through its most tumultuous period, distinguishing himself as one of the greatest leaders of modern times. Renowned presidential historian Doris Kearns Goodwin described the quality that fueled Lincoln's rise through professional trials and personal struggles: a fierce ambition. Yet this drive was not merely for selfish gain and glory. He was compelled to accomplish something worthy in life so that the world would be a better place for his having lived in it. It was a righteous ambition rooted in classical sources and our own Jewish tradition, to seek immortality not in stone or silver, but in the memory of a world healed and made more whole for having been touched by such a life. In many ways, our times are not unlike Lincoln's. Our nation confronts unprecedented trials, a raging global pandemic, a ravaged economy, and a stark confrontation with our original sin of racism, all against the backdrop of a nation more divided than at any time since the 1960s or even Lincoln's 1860s. And at the center of it all, we face a uniquely critical election with consequences and implications far beyond any we've experienced in our lifetimes. Perhaps it's a pipe dream to seek a luminary like Lincoln to face the tests of our times, but great and historic leadership is forged when character confronts crisis. The leadership we revere in our past, dream for our future, and desperately need in our present emerges when a moment defines a leader and a leader meets the moment. And so, aside from looking to the classics of Western wisdom, consulting our civic history, or perusing the virtual aisles of business books, we Jews look to our texts for insights into the qualities we should seek in a leader. Because in our representative democracy, we possess the power to choose our leaders. It is perhaps the greatest responsibility and most precious opportunity of citizenship, at least for the moment. And so, we are compelled to plumb the treasury of our tradition to inform the casting of this vote, one which will so significantly determine our fate and our future. Amongst the many examples of leadership provided by our texts, there are three that truly speak to the needs of this moment. They share at their heart the notion of the righteous exemplar, in Hebrew, a mofet, one who inspires us not only in how they led, but in how they lived. In Abraham's compelling vision, the prophet Nathan's strategic courage, and Moses' unique humility, we find key qualities of leadership that are as relevant to the needs of our day as they were millennia ago. Abraham was very old for his era, well established and beyond the point in life when the young seek to make their mark. And so, when he heard God's call of Lech Lecha, go forth, a command to risk everything that gave his life stability and security, to set out on a journey of mind, body, and spirit to an unknown destination, Abraham still packed up his life and left. With a determination rooted in bravery as much as faith, Abraham assessed the risk to himself and his tribe and went forth, settling a new land, forging a new faith, and founding a new people. Abraham transformed his personal vision of a world beyond the cold stone and lives sacrificed to ancient idolatry, charting a path worthy of a faith in a singular, surpassing God. Abraham is known as the first Hebrew, Ha-Ivri, from whom our people became collectively known. Literally understood as one who has crossed over from the Euphrates River, the rabbis saw something deeper. Abraham's indelible vision thrust him onto the other side of the stubborn superstitions and corrupt practices of his culture. And he risked it all to bring something new, something uplifting, and something lasting to his community. A revolutionary change in perspective that profoundly altered the course of civilization. The prophet Nathan was one of many who reflected the kind of courage that inspires the still popular aspiration to speak truth to power. And when that speaking of truth is in the cause of justice, it generates the power to transform reality. Nathan's role as voice of God was balanced by the exalted position of one of Israel's most successful and iconic monarchs, King David. Building on his mythic status as a youthful victor over the fearsome Goliath, David's triumphs became the template for our notion of a Messiah. David defeated our perennial enemies, the Philistines, rescued the Ark of the Covenant from captivity, and united the disparate tribes of Israel into one nation around the new capital, Jerusalem. But as is often the case, David let his privilege and power go to his head, taking in the beautiful and very married Bathsheba for himself, and taking out her husband by sending him into the heat of battle to be killed. The prophet Nathan, reflecting the presence and principles of God, could not stand idly by at such a sinful breach of morality. Yet despite his considerable courage, he could not simply walk up to the king and castigate him publicly. So he devised a clever strategy. He approached David with the story of a case in need of royal judgment. A wealthy man had many sheep, and a poor man had only one ewe lamb that his children loved as a member of the family. A traveler came to town, and the rich man, not wanting to take from his own flock, took the poor man's ewe to prepare a feast. David became enraged, demanding that the poor man be compensated and the rich man put to death. Nathan then delivers the gut punch to the king. You are that man. It was a bold and courageous move, strategically delivered with the power of divine writ. David could have responded as rulers often do, seeing himself as above the law and beyond the standards that apply to others. But David is chastened, as Nathan reveals that his life will forever be marked by strife and suffering. We learn from Nathan's inspiring example that courage, skillfully wielded in the pursuit of justice and right, is worthy and necessary to meet abuse of power. Moses had every reason to be arrogant, proud, and full of hubris as a leader handpicked by God. And though he is regarded by our tradition as the person closest to God, he was, against all intuition and expectation, a paragon of humility. When he is given the charge at the burning bush to confront the God-king Pharaoh and to liberate our enslaved people, his first response is, Mi anochi, who am I? Or more colloquially, who, me? He notes his slowness of speech, reminding God that he did not possess the oratory or charisma of the natural leader. God saw something distinct and special in Moses. God saw virtues and abilities rooted in his modesty that defied the usual standards of leadership, a quality of character rooted deeply within his soul. Later, these qualities would be put to the test as his siblings Miriam and Aaron threatened to undermine him. They claimed that they too had what it takes to lead. For a moment, the text abruptly departs from the story, emphasizing that Moses was ish anav me'od, a very humble man, more so than any on the face of the earth. The story then continues. As he does not respond to his siblings' treachery and pettiness in kind, but rather seeks to rise above. He even pleads for mercy for Miriam when God punishes her for her plotting. The rabbis assign to Moses an abundant patience and the pursuit not only of recognition or reward, but of a driving desire to make real God's vision for the people. The clarity of Abraham's vision, the depth of Nathan's courage, and the distinction of Moses' humility provide an inspiring, counterintuitive, and insightful alternative to our culture's classic expectations for leadership. They offer compelling guidance for us as we are about to choose who will lead our nation in these perilous times. And so, what's lacking in our national character to meet the dire needs of the moment? A moment calling for a leader of thoughtful wisdom, moral conscience, and openness of mind and heart? Perhaps the most significant limits we bear as a country are widespread fear, a waning sense of common cause to inspired shared sacrifice, and divisions that seem insurmountable. A few examples from our presidential past provide some additional insights into the kind of leader we need to meet this moment. Today's uncertainties and dangers evoke our most intense and primal fears for ourselves and our families. At the height of the Great Depression, as our nation was mired in despair and saw only bleakness ahead, Franklin Roosevelt inspired a battered people with the words, quote, "Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself," going on to affirm that a resilient people would support a frank and vigorous leadership. Later, in the 1960s, as the nation moved further into the era of the Cold War and its specter of nuclear conflict, a young and vital John Kennedy inspired a hopeful nation with his vision of a new America, one rooted in more than individual liberty, a nation that could only achieve greatness when bound by the virtues of shared sacrifice and common purpose. Kennedy challenged us to, quote, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." Individual liberty and the common good are naturally complementary, rent apart only by leaders who seek to divert a citizenry from failures of duty and vision. And our country has certainly endured periods of extreme polarization. As our nation descended into civil war, Lincoln vainly but valiantly reminded us of our human capacity to rise above our base instincts for contempt and conflict. He counseled us to bind ourselves with the mystic chords of memory, which might swell the chorus of union when touched by the better angels of our nature. Perhaps it is unfair, if not unrealistic, to ask for a leader to emerge who brings the qualities and capabilities of a Lincoln, a Roosevelt, and a Kennedy, or of an Abraham, a Nathan, or a Moses. Perhaps all we can hope to find is a mensch, a decent person of goodwill to repair the breach and to chart a fresh path to be taken up by others. Perhaps what we need most is a servant leader. What is a servant leader? In many ways, it is a blending of the two models I shared, the captain of the ship of state who charts troubled waters, and the ancient prophet who calls us to collective conscience. The servant leader possesses a vibrant ambition and healthy ego, tempered by a fundamental desire to serve ideals and people beyond the self. The servant leader asks two defining questions. Do those I serve grow to become their best selves under my leadership? And will those most vulnerable attain a better life under my leadership? The servant leader shares rather than accumulates power, conveys an inspiring vision rather than dictating a personal agenda, and embraces the dreams of others as his or her own. I end where I began with the model of Abraham Lincoln. There is a quote that is often attributed to him, though its veracity is debated. If the power of its message is amplified by its association with the great emancipator, it is for the good. Lincoln counseled, quote, "I am not bound to win, but I am bound to be true. I am not bound to succeed, but I am bound to live by the light I have." As we embrace a new year of the Spirit and the possibilities of a new era of hope, may we strive to live by the lights we have, and may we choose a leader who brightens the way for us all. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will.